Assalamu alaikum listeners, welcome back to another episode on Boys in the Cave. Today we have a very, very special guest on the show. Dr. Shadee Elmasry began studying traditional Islamic sciences at 18 years of age, training in Yemen, Mecca, Medina, London and Cairo under renowned scholars. He holds a master's from the George Washington University and a PhD from SOAS, University of London, with research on Imam Abdullah bil Alawi al-Haddad. A former lecturer at institutions including Yale and SOAS, he now serves as scholar in residence and director of education at the New Brunswick Islamic Center. Is the founder of Sufina Society. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Shadee Elmasry.
Thank you very much. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Your Boys in the Cave or Three Boys podcast? Which one is it?
Our co-hosts have changed over the time. I've moved away. A lot actually happened, Dr. Shadee. Since the last time we've done our episode. You came down to Australia and stuff. We didn't get to meet, but inshallah, maybe next time. So how's your trip in Australia, by the way?
Well, it's always great. I mean, this time I went to Brisbane, which is more of a suburb and a nice calm area. And we went out to a park and we did like an intensive. But, you know, Sydney's always fun. Lakemba area, that's where I usually go. And I got to see the One Path guys and I like the vibe. I like the guys in Sydney. They're tough-nosed guys.
Sydney's a lot more because I've lived in Sydney my whole life. So I moved to Melbourne about 2-3 years ago. So Sydney's just the hub for Muslims. There's so much happening. You should, inshallah, one day come down for Ramadan. The Ramadan night markets. It's like, I mean, it's controversial because it distracts people from Ibadah and this and that. They have this big night market in Howden Street in Lakemba. They close down the whole road and there's all these shops and stalls and food and this and that. But yeah, definitely a vibe in Sydney, whereas it's a lot more low-key and chill in other places in Australia when it comes to the Muslim community. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it and stuff. Hopefully it was good.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it.
A lot of people, you didn't come to Melbourne. A lot of people wanted you in Melbourne.
Oh, no, I've been to Australia 3 times, believe it or not. All 3 times it's been Sydney, then Sydney and Brisbane. I've never been to Melbourne or Plymouth or whatever else city you got there.
Yeah, inshallah, come down to Melbourne. I'll show you the streets of Melbourne, inshallah. The good coffee places and stuff.
Nice. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So today, there's a lot I wanted to discuss, but we'll get into it, inshallah. I think there's a lot happening, obviously, currently worldwide. And on top of that, Muslims are trying to make sense of their situation, what to do, especially Muslims in the West. So my first question would be, from your perspective, what are the most pressing spiritual and moral challenges Muslims in the West face today?
I think psychologically, when you see a genocide going on and you can't physically do anything about it, and nor is anything being done for you to say, okay, at least it's being done. I can't do anything. And most calamities in the world, you can't do anything about it. But at least you see something being done. Or you don't see the calamity at all, right? It's like usually one or the other. Like Rohingya, most people didn't even realize it's happening. The Uyghurs in China, it's not even on the radar. It's just a word we hear. And then you got like earthquakes or what have you, but you see people doing something about it. So at least it gets settled, or you don't even know about it. But in this case, it's in your face, and nobody's doing anything about it, and it starts to weigh down on your conscience, and you just go through different phases. You just try not to be numb to it, although that's basically what is happening to a lot of people. They're just becoming numb, but you can't let it happen. Or you become so angry you don't know what to do with yourself. You just got to always at least keep it on the top of your mind. And we do have the Prophet saying, if you can't change it with your hand, change it with your tongue. Can't change it with your tongue, change it with your heart. So you hate people who can do something and aren't doing it. You hate the people who are perpetrating it. At the very least, you hate them with your heart. And you make dua for them, for the people suffering in it and the kids that are starving. That's all you could do. And it feels like that is also a form of punishment, that we're not able to take action. Or it's just a consequence of misguidance and leaving off Sharia decade and decade after decade, now you end up in this position where you're just watching a genocide in 4K right in front of you, and yet you're powerless completely.
It's interesting you said seeing it in 4K, because I can I suspect, historically, obviously they didn't have access to that kind of technology. So if there was something in this magnitude playing out, they don't necessarily have. They can't just watch in real time from their home. So for us, like, we're sort of in this world where we can see it like that. I remember, like, on top of what happened it's happening in Gaza and Palestine, when the Christchurch shooting happened in New Zealand, and you're actually watching someone like murder, people, innocent people. That was such a shock to the system. Like, it's like whoa, like, this is the extent of things that are happening around the world. And now we're seeing it now with, we're seeing visuals of, babies being killed, and, hospitals being bombed. And it's insane that, we're sitting from our homes, in our couches, especially in the West, right, living comfortably, and then we just see these visuals, and we still, we feel helpless. So my question would be, like, how do these challenges differ from, those faced in Muslim majority societies, both historically and in our times?
I mean, they really shouldn't differ, but for whatever reason, this one is like in everyone's face. And other nations, when they have calamities and crisis, they're nations, right? They're countries. Gaza is not a country. They're not citizens of any nation. They're almost like being put in the middle, defenseless. And that's one of the differences. So yeah, there's been nations that went into other nations and did all destruction what they've done. But when it comes to Gaza, it does have this difference in that it's not a nation. It's like occupied territory, as we all know is what it's called. But that's one of the differences. They don't have any way to defend themselves.
So, bearing in mind that we're kind of living in the West and we're speaking in the West and speaking, to Muslims in the West mainly, I guess the question is, I mean, how do you feel that these challenges are different from your experiences in the Muslim community in the Muslim world, and how they perceive things happening in Gaza and Palestine versus what we're doing? I mean, just to give an example, I'm sure we've all seen the brothers in Egypt, brothers and sisters in Egypt throwing the bottles full of food, lentils, rice, whatever it is, into the sea and making dua to Allah that it reaches someone in Gaza that needs it. Is there a different in kind of perception about responsibility towards Gaza between us and the Muslim world? How are they kind of how are they facing this in your kind of perspective?
You're talking about Western Muslims, how they reacting to this?
Yeah, I think it's the differences between Western Muslims and kind of Muslims in the Muslim world. It seems like
I don't know.
We're a little bit more removed. Do you know? You know what I mean?
Like, we're geographically removed, but nonetheless, I think everyone who's conscious, who's aware, is just disgusted, and that's just not something that's ever going to change. And honestly, how we feel, I mean, I always say I feel disgusted. I feel disgusted of this situation of knowing that this is happening and not taking any action, not being able to take any action. But how we feel is irrelevant. It's how they feel. But the reaction is that people want to we wish to give aid, but aid workers aren't allowed in. They're not even, they used to be. They were allowed in. There were people on the ground. And at least we could say, all right, at least we got them food. This time around, now that door is closed, it's a very bad feeling, to say the least, to be able to do nothing except remember them in our prayers. That's it. And that should be like all the time, nonstop. Otherwise, you feel sick to your stomach. You feel disgusted at yourself, and it's a terrible situation. But nonetheless, how we feel is irrelevant. even though I'm saying like this is how we feel, but it's really irrelevant. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. So okay, well, I mean, so bearing that in mind, bearing kind of the political aspects of it aside for a second, you know, as you mentioned a bit earlier on, it seems like it's almost a punishment that we can't do anything. How do we kind of build ourselves spiritually to face that? And you've touched on it a little bit already, but how do we kind of really build ourselves spiritually so that, you know, we can constantly remember them, the people of Gaza and Palestine and the oppressed everywhere else, but, you know, specifically Gaza, constantly, and to take initiative, I think, when opportunities do arise for us to do things, because that is kind of first and foremost a spiritual, you know, state, isn't it? For us to be able to kind of even be able to move and do something. So how do we start to build that spiritual fortitude?
There was a guy who recently had a vision of the Prophet, peace be upon him. I mentioned this on the live stream today, but he said that he saw a vision of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims approaching him with joy to see the Prophet, but his face had anger, and he looked at them and he turned his face away at the Muslims coming to him. Then from a man approached him and he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Gaza." He said, "You can come here." So a vision like that tells us we're in a very blameworthy state. Even if, genuinely speaking and legally speaking, there's all sorts of roadblocks in front of us from actually doing anything, it doesn't matter. It's a very blameworthy condition for all of us to be in. Whether you're legally by Sharia liable or not is a separate discussion. This is a terrible situation to be in. Another person messaged me and said that he said he knows people in Gaza. And he said, our hatred for the rest of the Muslims is growing every day. We literally hate you, all of you. How could you be 2 billion? We are like 1.5 million. How is this physically possible? You guys could have walked here. You could have walked and brought us some food to eat. They're not saying go fight the IDF and jihad. Food to eat. They're not even calling you to take arms and die for them. So when you think of these stories, you start to remember Gaza all the time in your mind. And then you have to also include with them all those whose catastrophes and calamities have not been in 4K, that have happened without the same media presence. You got to remember them too. That's sort of the least charity, zakah, of our blessing, is to think about those who don't have blessing.
SubhanAllah, so I get, are there any examples that you would give to kind of the listeners about historically when these kind of things happened, when these genocides or you know, the sacking of Baghdad, etc., you know, these kind of things, where Muslims were really tested and helpless and unable to really change kind of their fate, if you like. Are there any examples that come to mind of how they kind of persevered with their faith, how they stuck to kind of the remembrance of Allah, the dhikr of Allah, the love of the Prophet, والسلام, and so on, in the face of these kind of overwhelming, you know, emotional experiences?
Well, Dr. Salah Abul Hajj, he said that the duty of every Muslim, you help Gaza by helping Islam. Because if Islam rises somewhere, that's what's going to defend. We have the theory, we have the blueprint, but we just don't have anyone to do it, to practice it. The theory's there, the answers are there, but the practice of it seems not to be there. So he says, promote the deen as much as you can wherever you are. It'll pop up somewhere, hopefully, and they'll defend our brothers. He said, Muslims were never after the Umayyads one nation. They always had city-states. At first, it was just broken up into Andalus and the rest of the Ummah. Then later on, it became city-states. but there was always a state that was strong enough to defend the nation and defend the weak. Now we don't have any of that. So he said it's on every Muslim, whether you're in Turkey or in Bangladesh or where have you. Do something to bring the Sharia onto the minds of people so that they could one day, you never know who's going to act upon it, and grow strong enough to preserve and protect your ummah. Secondly, the theory and the answers are easy. Right? The Prophet ﷺ told us, why would it be that nations can pick at us like someone picking grapes or fruit or food from a table, like that easily? Why is it? He says, because you fear death. And what that means is you stop fighting. Now, it does sound absurd, anybody to call people to war when they haven't been to war and they're living in the comfort of their own home. So I'm not calling anyone to go fight. But we know that that is the answer. There has to, like, how did the Mongols come and go? They didn't come and go because they just expired. They didn't die off by virus. They didn't have a change of heart. Mongols and Crusaders came and went because they were fought. Like, what were the Mamluks doing in Egypt at Ain Jalut? They weren't having, like, peaceful conferences. They fought them back. What was Nuruddin Zinki doing? He was putting up a fight. So that's the theory. Okay. And now we've almost become queasy about this because of the like misguided jihad groups or all the other ideas out there. But if you actually look at the hadith of the Prophet, he tells you why these terrible things are happening. You love this world and you hate death, meaning you've left off jihad. So it's not for me to call for anyone to do a jihad, but we know that that's the theoretical and Shari'i answer to the whole situation of Muslims getting picked on, wiped off the earth, starved, killed, abused the way that's happening in Gaza. That's the answer. I mean, it's really that.
Sorry, Dr. Shadee, it's really interesting you bring that up because like my question is more based around the fact that we see quote unquote like, you know, Sufis that are very uncomfortable when saying the things you're saying right now when it comes to like, we know what we need to do at the end of the day, but they ascribe a very like almost non-combative approach, or like the fact that like pure spiritualism in every facet will somehow, you know, remove the idea of, you know what I mean? Like, I think I've been in a lot of like Sufi circles and stuff like, obviously, mashallah, like I've always, you know, have something to learn, and that's why I go to those circles. So I value those groups and circles, especially in Australia. But when I've had many debates and arguments, respectful debates and arguments, when we talk about these kind of topics, it's almost like they're almost like, look, you know, we have to learn Islam first, and we have to do spirituality, and that's when the hearts will turn. That's when, you know, we'll get justice for the people in Palestine. But it's like, where's the fighting aspect? Because that's like completely missing from the Islamic history that I've learned. You obviously have that. That's a big component as to why, for example, many parts of the world Islam spread and all that kind of, you know, historical data that we do have. So anyway, so it's interesting. Do you feel like you are kind of going against the grain amongst, you know, compared to other, you know, Sufis that are in the community, or even just people that ascribe to the Sufi tradition?
I mean, if you look at the history of Sufis in the past, there was no such thing as just being a Sufi. You had a whole religion. You have aqidah. You have a Sharia. And Tasawwuf is merely a part of it. And it's an important part of it. It's what keeps your heart sincere and makes your deeds sincere. And Ahmad Zarruq, he says that these things are like the soul and the body. They can never be separated. Another sheikh gave an example. He says that you have your aqidah and you have your Sharia and you have your tazkiyah, and they're like the tea, the hot water, the tea leaf, the hot water, and the sugar. Nobody could say, I'm into sugar, and that's it. And nobody could say, take a sip of one and then lick the sugar and then sniff the tea leaf, and then you'll enjoy your tea. They all have to be mixed one together. So this concept of a Sufi, firstly, it doesn't even really exist. There's no Zuhed anymore, right? They make maybe one out of, in every city, in every masjid, you'll see someone who's a Zahid by accident because he's sick or poor or something. But the truth of the matter is that this is just one subject in an entire Sharia that we're supposed to be practicing. Tazkiyat an-nafs is one subject. It's one checkbox, right, on the items that a Muslim has to do. You have to have right aqidah. You have to have right ibadah. You have to learn. Your financial transactions have to be sound. You have to contribute to the community. The spirit of all this is sincerity, removing it, which is required. The precondition for that, remove envy. Remember Allah much. I don't even believe in the concept of Sufis, that's it anymore. Yeah, maybe his emphasis is on that, but that's it. You have a whole Sharia, right? You have a whole religion to practice, and this is really merely just one spirit or one aspect within it. And that's what's going to produce the right mindset and the right answer when we come face to face with tribulations and problems like this. And let me tell you something else too. In the early century, the Sufis were the biggest problem to the colonizers until they figured out, they eliminated the imams of them one at a time, either through jailing them or defeating them, killing them, like Omar Mukhtar or Abdul Qadir in Algeria, Amir Abdul Qadir, or Imam al-Sanusi in Libya, or also you had in the Caucasus, in the Caucasus, who fought against the Russians was Imam Shamil. One at a time, they defeated them or killed them or jailed them. Next generation came, they co-opted them. So now Sufis are have this not possibly, they have a reputation of being co-opted, but that's only the recent history, right? It's the recent history. So it has nothing to do, it's not a function of being Sufis, it's a function of being close to power. And the Prophet ﷺ is narrated in a sound hadith. You don't get close to the powers that be except you get fitna. And the fitna is inaction. It's not something specific or historically connected to Sufiya at all. Historically, they had Sharia and they practiced Sharia, and that's it.
No, I think it's really interesting, actually, this whole discussion. Once you start to unpick, Tasawwuf and Sufism, if that's what you want to call it, and actually look at it under the kind of the gloss of, particular conferences that kind of preach a very individualistic asceticism that you practice at home by yourself. And when you unpick that, I remember having listening to Sheikh Sahel Hanif, who is one of the students of Dr. Salah al-Hajj, and talking about the building your own Medina, right? Building your own Medina where you are as a community. And you look at kind of the past and Sufis in the past and how they did create their own little corner, the Zawiya, etc., whatever it was, their own community, from where they kind of then went out and did other things, not just kind of the wird and so on and so forth, which is a big part of everything in spirituality and fortifying yourself and the rest of it. But then actually to enact the haqq, if you like, in the world. The examples that you mentioned, the Tijani, are well known for going out and involving themselves in social causes in West Africa, for instance. Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio, another example, another famous example of exactly that, kind of resisting colonization by teaching, by raising arms, by fighting, and so on and so forth. But I think it's so important for us in the West to recognize that we do need to build our communities as Muslims wherever we are, so that when it comes to things like this, we have an ability, at least locally, to do something, whether that's kind of raise funds, raise arms, try and change the local kind of discourse around Palestine, and make sure that the truth is being put out there alongside kind of the lies, and try to uncover those. But we have that ability. You cannot do it by yourself. It's not an individual task. So I think that aspect of Sufism or the Sufi kind of experience has been kind of, I don't know, from my point of view, slightly co-opted, maybe. Maybe in the West, some of the bad experiences people have had with tariqas and so on, where there's been some abuse or whatever it is, and it's kind of, it's not been outward. It's been very kind of the tariqa and kind of insular, if you like. Maybe that's what's kind of caused some of this rift. But yeah, I think at the core of it, it's not like that, is it? It's absolutely kind of building that community to engage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into defending any tariqas or any people. You either do right or you do wrong, and the easiest path, the best way to live is just by the truth, right? You either do right or you do wrong, and it applies to us too. And therefore, a person should have husn al-dhann, have a good opinion of people where their action is interpretive, can be interpreted both ways. Why? Because your standard is going to come back to us too. It'll come back to you eventually. So you want people to have a generous opinion where your behaviors could go either way, or your decisions could go either way. But I'm not in the business of defending Sufis, and the subject matter of Tasawwuf is a real subject, and people they're beholden to the standard of Sharia and the standard of general decency and goodness, and everything else after that is up for debate. That includes all the Islamic groups, and to have a generous view of where something could be interpreted. But there is an aspect where if you're good at community, chances are you won't be a revolutionary, right? Sometimes society needs major change. The people who are community builders are lumping together families. Families have kids. They end up moving very slow and very cautiously because their actions have consequences on many people, including kids. So if people realize the need for community, chances are they will not be the people who are going to be revolutionaries. When I say that certain things need to change, right, in a community or in a country or in a society, the community people will not be the ones to do it. They're serving another, for example, myself. We have a community here. We have kids. We have youth. We have elderly. We have regular people. We have thinkers, and we have normal people. Okay? So every action and every word has to be measured on how is that going to affect them, because that's like the prime responsibility of a masjid or a community. People who in the past who have brought major change to the world, they never are community leaders. They tend to be isolated figures who don't have to answer to the question of what is the consequence of my action besides myself, right? Besides myself, what's the consequence of my action? So sometimes there are virtuous deeds that disallow you from doing other virtuous deeds. Okay? And like Imam Malik wrote, he said, the virtues are like the rain. Sometimes they fall on one place and not the other. And another place may get another virtue, right? And not the same virtue that Allah gave you. And it's why the Prophet ﷺ said, as an ummah, you're an ummah. Okay. يَشُدُّ بَعْضُهُ بَعْضًا. The nation, like an ark, each brick comes to form an ark. It's the pressure of all the bricks together that make the ark. And that's exactly what the ummah needs. So some people who are living alone and have no communal responsibilities, they could do what a community person can't do. And vice versa.
You don't think that... sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, but do you not think, from my point of view, the community enables those kind of figures to kind of exist, right? And I think of there are several examples I can think of. I mean, if we look at kind of the early Ikhwan, for all their faults, they did produce some exemplary figures who did kind of really challenge the status quo. I remember reading in Zain al-Ghazali's book, The Return of the Pharaoh, that they would when they would arrest Sayyid Qutb rahimahullah, they would put him in an isolated cell because his effect, of just his presence on the other members of the Ikhwan, as a figure, right? But also I'm thinking of kind of the Black Panther Party, for example, and some of the things that they did was a lot of what they did was building community, but for the time, the things that they kind of enacted, like the free kind of breakfast club, that sort of thing, was to my mind revolutionary and enabled people to kind of have that stability and have that community from where they could then depart onto further politics or further kind of further actions.
Yeah, but again, look at the results of those groups. Is it stable? Do they even exist anymore? Right. That's in terms of the Black Panther Party. Right. If they had, there's a lot to say about the Black Panther Party, but the result is they don't exist anymore. Right. Not because of anything except for their behaviors that went outside the law. And also, by the way, I mean, J. Edgar Hoover is one of the dirtiest humans to have existed in the United States. The way that he handled that situation. But when you look at other Islamic groups, there have been also major blowbacks where some people didn't handle so well. Right. So, but you are right. It is not outside the realm of reason or Sharia to have a group that cares about community but also affects change. In Turkey, the most active dawah in the last 20 years have been the political groups, right? They've been the political groups. So if your group is only based on Sufism, you're going to have a bias towards solitary action and non-worldly action. That's why that cannot be the basis. It's got to be just Islam with all of its ingredients. It's concern for the outward and the inward, for ideas and practices and things that are happening in the world. So that's why I'm against this idea of a Sufi group, because you're only taking one part of a whole Sharia. You're going to be skewed, as you said, skewed towards inaction and solitary behavior. Right? We can't be. That can't be our call.
Yeah. No, I think that's reasonable. Very reasonable. Yeah, to have something that's kind of a community, but then also kind of some kind of revolutionary, especially in the face of what we're seeing now, right? In the Gaza and so on, to have something that's kind of much more pragmatic, practical, and much more kind of forceful, I think, perhaps is the word. Okay. Tanzim, anything you want to bring in on that?
Does that mean, Dr. Shadee, because we're talking about, the problematic nature of just fixating on the spirituality and that's it. Well, obviously, there's other quote unquote other Muslim groups. It could be like Barelvis, etc., that may really be on top of aspects when it comes to, I don't know, talking about Palestine or the actions that we should do. Does that mean that you're more than happy to sort of align with them, or it could even be our Salafi brothers in certain aspects happy to align with them over that kind of Sufi spiritualistic sort of groups that do exist, which we will probably feel at home because of I guess our upbringing and our experiences as well.
Well, I personally think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made it very clear, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. So where there's bir, we should support it. Where there's taqwa, we should support it. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Don't come together on sins or disobedience. So that should be the measuring stick of who we do something with. You don't do something with just because of their ideas and their ideology, because you can have the right ideas, but in this instance, you're doing something wrong. You can have the wrong ideas, in this instance, you're doing something right. So it's situational. That's how I like to put it. It's situational. In this situation, who is the victim versus the oppressor, or who's doing the good deed and who's not doing the good deed? All that's the standard. It shouldn't be by party. It shouldn't be by individual. It should be by the standard of what we have been taught by the four madhabs in the Sharia is a good deed and what is not a good deed. And insofar as someone does a good deed, they deserve support. Right? And insofar they're doing a bad deed, they deserve to be corrected with husn al-dhann. Husn al-dhann of why they fell into it, but they should be corrected. As the Prophet ﷺ said, support your brother, oppressor or oppressed. Okay? Of course, we all have our ideas of what the truth is in Islam and Sharia and who the noble shuyukh are that we should follow and learn from and take from. But it's always the principle over the person. People can make mistakes, but the principle is what's most important. If you live by that, right, you'll live at ease. You will never have to justify something that you actually don't truly believe is right.
That's interesting because my next question would be about, you mentioned previously about Sufis who might be close to power, and that's a reason why they're not conducting any action per se. There's a lot of inaction, right? So what's interesting, like when you're also talking about colonization, the situation that comes to mind historically was understanding, because we interviewed Professor Richard Eaton probably last year, and I was talking to him about how Islam spread in the Bengal region, and so he sort of articulated how the Muslims had there was a lot of jungles and forests, and so what the Muslims did is pretty much cleared the land, had relationships with the Mughal Empire in the sense that they had revenue from the rice paddies that were made as a result of the land clearing. But on top of that, a lot of because that episode we were talking about the reason as to why Islam spread in the subcontinent, and people theorize like it's jihad, it's this and that. It could be a Muslim ruler kind of forcing people to convert, those kind of stereotypes. But then him with his research, with his geographical research, with his historical records, analyzed the reason mostly for why Islam spread in the Bengal region is because of this land clearing situation where there's almost like an ecosystem, like a Muslim ecosystem where people were getting paid obviously to clear the forest and that kind of, and they were obviously Sufi quote unquote inclined. But then that kind of brought together a lot of communities. There were masjids made as a result. And on top of that, they were getting revenue, and that revenue they could pay people that were working alongside them, especially in the masjids as well. So there was this whole Muslim ecosystem that was economy that was happening, which is really amazing, because that is the community aspect that we were talking about just then about community building. And so I think in that same context, there'll also be Sufis that are close to power. They may not have any action in that context, which might be interesting to sort of unpack. So my question, I just wanted to give that example, but also ask you, like, what would your advice be, or what would your what's your thoughts about those Sufis that are close to power, that are not conducting any action? Like, what would your advice be to them? And what would you say to them?
Well, a community is only going to take as leaders those who help. And in the short term, you can get away with past loyalties. But in the long term, the leaders are going to be those who serve the ummah. And in the past, how Qadiriyah or Tijaniya or Shadiliya have ever become so mainstream was because they had done so much good for the ummah. They had protected the ummah. They had benefited the ummah. The Alawi in Yemen, they started off a small group of people, but they made a conscious decision. Our role will be here to be merchants, to study the deen, and to reconcile between the tribes. And we swear off civil wars and seeking power. And what ended up happening is, over time, people saw how much benefit they brought, and they became the most honored group because of how much benefit they brought. Sayyidina al-Faqih al-Muqaddam swore off all fighting against Muslims. And they, until this day, their policy is not to name names so that they don't bring conflict within the ummah. If you want if you want Allah to elevate your group and your idea, then represent it with khidmah. Represent your group by being the best at khidmah. Do the best services you can to the ummah, and Allah will elevate you. And that's within Islam is no different within humanity at large, because the Quran says you are the best nation brought onto the people when you command good, forbid wrong, and believe in Allah. Right? So it's actually in reverse order, but the outsider sees it that way. Okay. The actual order is that you have to strengthen your iman, leave off sins, and then do good. And then the world will see your good, okay, and then they don't see the other two parts until afterwards. But in the whole world, if Muslims are wondering, well, why are we kicked around? Well, what benefit are we bringing to the world? When was the last time anyone outside the Ummah of Islam said, Alhamdulillah, or said thank you, or thank God we got Muslims around? Like, when was the last time that ever happened? That's why we got a soup kitchen here. It's like a challenge. I want to see in 20, 30 years if the new generation of kids who live in that area will end up growing up to say, thank God we had the Muslims there, because otherwise we wouldn't have eaten. So when was that the last time that happened? So the question is about, if you want to be close to power, if you want to be in power, power is not by being close to it or by taking it. Actual true power is by what you've done for people who in turn love you and who in turn elevate you without you having to seek it. So that's the message. If you want to be close to power, if you want to retain your power, then you need to serve, benefit others.
I think that's such an important point about khidmah and reflecting spirituality within that, because I think, again, kind of, it's so popular now to think of spirituality, maybe popular is the wrong word, but mainstream, to think of spirituality as this individual experience you do in your home or whatever it is, whereas it is khidmah. It's a massive part of it, which has an end, right? Spirituality has a final end in the akhirah and a goal here. It should have a goal here, right? To produce helpful fruits for your community, the ummah at large. And I think I don't know if you've seen this, but I don't know if you've seen Tanzim actually either. But there's been some kind of recent discussions about scholars and their role and whether they've failed in kind of discussing Gaza and guiding the ummah in Gaza, which is an interesting discussion. And I'm not sure exactly where I sit with it, but I think that particular bit about spirituality has maybe been misinterpreted at some level, or misrepresented at some level, because when you're right, when we kind of examine it and we think about why we fortify ourselves, why we connect to Allah and the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, part of it is to help people, part of it is to do khidmah and bring benefit to those around us, and carry the haqq and carry the Sharia in all of its aspects outwardly as well. So I think,
I don't find there to be much productivity in general swath of blame of a specific group, because every group is diverse and has a lot of different ideas and different people in it. So there's no value in it. And what's going to happen is that people who are going to pinpoint the good people in that group and say, oh, this is what they're saying about you or whatever. So I don't find much value in isolating a group unless it's a group that has, a set definition that is blameworthy, right? Like a theology that is known that this is literally the definition of the group, then we could discuss that theology. But to just cast a broad net of blame, you end up not having any. Same thing with naming people who do something wrong, right? The moment you do that, all his family and all his friends will miss the whole point. They'll miss the whole point, and they'll whine and cry and get sensitive, okay, about their beloved person, imam or sheikh, and they will miss the whole point of which part of what he's saying or doing is worthy of being critiqued, even being worthy of heresy or zandaqa, even in some cases, which is bid'ah mukaffira, severely misguided and heretical innovations in their theology. They'll miss the whole point, because to them, he's uncle so-and-so, he's dad, he's the local imam and we love him so much and how can anyone say anything, and they get all sensitive. So this is why many of the scholars just mention the point and don't attack the person. So in the same vein, the different Islamic groups that exist in the world today, because of the absence of a unifying or strong body that's given us pretty much a default Islam. In the past, that's what existed. Today, that doesn't exist, and every group will come up with what they believe is best. You can't generalize. You can't generalize unless they actually define themselves in a certain manner that's incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's again a reasonable reasonable kind of statement. So I guess my follow-on question from there is, when we're trying to mobilize communities in any khidmah, but I mean, let's talk about Gaza specifically, where it's difficult, I think. Where do you see the line is drawn between kind of guidance from scholars in the spiritual aspects, etc., and then the actual kind of pragmatic, political, social, cultural changes and tactics, strategy, etc., that need to happen? Because if we're kind of, scholarship is one kind of specialty. I mean traditional Islamic scholarship. Politics, strategy, and tactics is another, specialty, and the two often aren't, in the same person. Where they are, mashallah, it's brilliant, but often they're not. So how do we where do we draw the lines? How do we balance it? Who plays what role exactly?
I think it's a specialty. Always governance, politics, strategy, that stuff is a specialty, and we should see who's out there who's good, and we should support them and push them up. If your training is in one field, you may be really good at that field. That doesn't mean you're going to be good at anything else. If Allah throws a burden upon you, He'll help you. But beyond that, you got your specialty. And who's going to strategize and plan? And that's like, as Imam al-Haddad said, the Ummah rises by four people. The first is the jurist, the scholar who basically sets the GPS for us. The second is the Sufi, who gives the spirit of leaving off this world and doing everything solely for the sake of Allah. The third is the administrator, the manager, the leader, who knows how to manage, who knows how to lead, who knows how to execute. He's got the CEO skill set. And the fourth is the financier, who may not have any of these three specialties, but Allah gave him the gift. He knows how to make money, and he makes millions upon millions upon billions, and he's the one who funds the whole thing. So Imam al-Haddad put it there, you got these four, and he says within that you have the four Khalifas. So you had different specialties. No one managed a nation better than Omar ibn Khattab and ran it better than Omar al-Khattab. No one handled the dark ages, the dark time, the civil war better than Sayyidina Ali. Rebellion after rebellion after rebellion. Right? No one established the finances before and after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ, more than Uthman ibn Affan. And no one reflected pure submission and followership of the Prophet better than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So that's where you have different skill sets, and we should, have a healthy community. You have to have those skill sets. Like right now in the West, we don't have like a political class, a class of people who know the world of politics well. The theory of politics overlapping with Sharia, yeah, a lot of imams can speak about that. I can give you a talk about that part of things. But that's not actual politicking. That's not actually knowing how to interact with today's world of politics. There needs to be a special class like that. And there are people, and I know one guy in our local community, he used to do this stuff. He retired from it now. But he was in very close knit with on the Democrat side. And then you have Sami Hamdi. He's got his own views on things. But these are the people whose like specialty is this kind of political analysis.
I had a question to take a slight turn, but we're talking about, like, touching on what you were saying, Sheikh. Like, in Australia, obviously, would have heard of Senator Fatima Payman, and
Again?
Fatima Payman, the senator, the
Yeah.
lady that crossed the floor. Yeah. So
No,
I
you
don't.
got it. The name rings a bell, but you got to remind me.
Okay, so it's been last year probably. Like, she crossed the floor when it came to aligning with the Greens over her own party, and then she
I mean,
left the Labour Party,
okay.
the floor
Yeah.
of the Parliament. Yeah, on the issue of Gaza and Palestine. And what happened? I don't know if you heard the recent news. Like, this is after what happened with the protests on the Harbour Bridge. The Australian government announced that they're recognizing Palestine as a state, and the reaction has been a little disappointing because there's been a lot of people in the community celebrating that as if it's a victory, right? And then on top of that, Fatima Payman released a video. She was like explaining how happy she is, basically, that this news has come out. But unfortunately, like, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a gesture. It doesn't really solve any problem. It doesn't really do anything. Just recognizing it as a state doesn't really do anything. And plus, there's so many other countries that have done it beforehand anyway. So people are like propping this up, and I feel like it kind of speaks to our political literacy, not knowing that this is like a facade, or this is just a game that the government is playing in order to distract us and from the real issues, right? Because Nazim Hussain did a good Instagram story where he's like, yeah, like, Australian government are recognizing Palestine as a state, but they're still sending, like, materials to Israel in order for them to continue the bombing. So that doesn't make any sense, right? So why are we celebrating this? Anyway, so it's kind of speaking to your point about not having, unfortunately, that kind of political class within the Muslim community that can kind of address these issues, nip it in the butt, and not make us as a community distracted. And alhamdulillah, there are obviously people that are trying to do that, but we just need to focus on it more. But the turn I wanted to take was also discussing about the Palestinian activism from non-Muslims, because we see, like, I feel, maybe you can disagree or not, but the Palestinian activism within non-Muslim circles has been far greater than Muslims and what they've done, because of the rallying and the protests and everything that they're doing. And even like in Sydney, they tried to like stop one of the ships to go to Israel because it carried I think some weaponry or anything for the Israeli army. So people like that were leading that weren't necessarily Muslims, right? So there was a lot of defiance from the non-Muslim community. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that in general. Like, what has been your thoughts in regards to the Palestinian activism from the non-Muslim communities, because they're obviously from leftist activists, and is that something to ally with? Is that something to prop up in our community and sort of discuss about? Because it is. I honestly think the Muslim community has sort of dropped the ball in this regard, and other groups have done a lot better than us, or mobilized better than us.
Well, they probably mobilize better because they're more experienced, they're bigger, they're better funded, and this is what they do best. So they probably outdid the Muslims for those reasons. And I do have. It's a gray area, because if they're gonna use Palestine to promote, their other aspects of their agenda, we have a problem with that. And sometimes you go to those marches, and it's great that they're having a march, but every other group is out there too, from the vegans to the homosexuals to the queers and transgenders. And it's like, okay, we need to sort of, do I really want to be part of this march? Because you actually end up promoting the whole thing, their whole leftist agenda. It's really up to that's why I said there's got to be a political class. I could tell you that the Sharia aspects of things, but the strategic things, I leave that up to other people who are into that. I know Tom Fakini is into that. He knows both sides, the Deeni side, he knows the activist side. But if they're not promoting those things, then yeah, why wouldn't I love it and support it? Right? If there was some kind of initiative by a secular party that wasn't, all inclusive to things that we can't stand for, why wouldn't I support it?
Because my question would be, this is to be devil's advocate. It's like, there's killing happening, there's massacres happening to such an extent that why should we necessarily be concerned with the alliance with other groups? Like, yeah, obviously we acknowledge that Muslims have their own principles, but at the same time, like, we want to stop this mess that's happening, right? So we should be able to ally with others in order to help us for that specific cause.
If the cause is just the right cause, then your background, that's between you and yourself, right? But when it's this one cause plus the other causes all together, no, that's where I got a problem, right? You see the difference? The difference is if there's a guy being killed and we're trying to protect him, it doesn't make a difference who we are, right? We're going to try to help him. But if now you're going to take this cause and lump into it all the other causes too, that's totally different. You see the difference? Like, it's not that it's I'm just saying that if they're lumping and they're adding and they're carrying multiple banners, then no, I can't stand for that Palestine banner to be next to a whole bunch of other banners. But if it just so happens that that person comes from a different background, then but their cause is one, then I only judge it by the cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is it, to get kind of deeper into it, is it kind of with the left, for instance, or let's say the communists, right? So they've been involved in activism for Palestine for decades. So what are we saying? Are we saying we're not going to support them for their vision for Palestine, right? For their vision, or their vision for the world, which is a communist vision, to have a communist kind of state and etc. Right? Is that what we're kind of? Is that what?
Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. If there's a severe flood, and we need to all help the people of the flood, and we're all going to help, then it doesn't make a difference who the person next to me is, because we're doing something good. But if now he's got a shirt, okay, evangelicals for helping people in the flood, now he's literally using this flood to also, yes, he's helping, but he's also using it to promote his thing. I can't stand with that, right? If there's a food pantry and we're all helping the poor, and it happens to be the guy next to me has an Israeli accent, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to ask. That's his business, right? We're helping the poor. The next guy, next day he shows up, IDF against poverty. Oh, I'm not working with him, because he's using the cause to promote his other cause too. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the difference between you happen to be something else versus you're using this cause to also promote your unholy cause. You see the difference? Like, for example, if there's a crisis of homelessness and your guys go out from the masjid to help out, and then we're going to have a march and we're going to help, and the guy next to you is wearing a shirt that says IDF against poverty, are you standing next to him? No, I'm not going to this march. If he happened to be Israeli and his accent Israeli, I don't have to ask and I don't have to know. That's different from when he actually wears puts his slogan here and his logo here, and is using this good deed that he's doing to also promote the IDF. So it's the same thing, whether he does that for Marxism, communism, queer and lesbian, or evangelical, or otherwise. Okay? Because you're actually using the crisis and benefiting your party and your ideology through this good deed. So for that, I'm not going to work with you. I'll do it my own way.
Okay, so I guess the other question then is, how do we how do we either leverage the experience that they have in mobilization, political and community mobilization, or promote the people that we have internally? Because I think, I know Tanzim may have experienced this as well, but I have certainly. When we call to kind of some community mobilization or political action, the challenge we often get is exactly that. It's kind of like you're being leftist, or 10, 15 years ago, when we were talking about doing marches and demonstrations, it was exactly that. What's a march going to do? You're acting like the communists, etc., and so on, right? So how do we leverage the experience and the strategy, despite kind of then trying to work with someone we don't want to work with?
I used to be very critical of people because the Ummah-wide situation wasn't like it is today. And I used to be very, very critical of people because I felt possibly they're being hoodwinked and they're being led astray. Like they don't see what's coming, which is basically that Queers for Justice, partners with MSA, Muslim Student Association, and maybe possibly Muslims don't realize that in the future you're going to be asked to compromise with them on something else. I think a lot of people are aware of these types of things these days, and I don't know, try to maybe just life experience gives me a little bit of husn al-dhann, like having a better opinion of people that they're trying to do something good, but I would simply just give them a heads up, and that's it. I don't think we're in the time right now that it's right to be heaping blame on somebody trying to do something good and maybe not doing it in the right way. But if they may be putting themselves in a compromising situation, then I would just tell them in a way that's constructive and not demoralizing to them. I'll tell them, this is my view of things, and my view is that, and also and also Sharia, we should never promote something that's unlawful. Nothing good will happen. And some of these groups, it's not just that he happens to be a Marxist and wants to help Palestine, or happens to be queer and wants to help Palestine. If they got a big Queer for Palestine sign, he's also promoting queerness. So that's the issue. And I would just leave it at that, because it's a different situation these days. And I'm not don't think it's right to demoralize. It's just give them a heads up. This is it. And that's it.
So, I mean, I don't want to beat the horse more than I want to, but now I want to be clear on something. So when we have a march, for instance, that's organized by, we have organizations here like Friends of Aqsa, and so on and so forth, like Muslim groups that join with, say, anti-war groups, right? And you just so happen to have some other people turn up at these marches, because we've had marches in London, and I'm sure in the States and in Australia as well, where you've had close to 1 million people turn up, weekly, and it just so happens, they're not organized by those people; they just happen to turn up. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Are they turning up with their flags or what?
In some cases, yes, yeah. In many cases, yeah.
Practically speaking, what is there to do? Are you going to go in the middle of the march and say, please put your flag down? That's not practical. What if he says no? Then what are you going to do? So if you were to do that, it's out of your hands. Like, you led the march, you initiated it, so it's good. But then someone comes and tries to latch on, and put up their flags. There's practically, I don't see what you can do, except express yourself once that, we only want flags of the cause, not of your other identity. You're just using it now, right? You're using this cause to promote your other identity, and that's not fair play in any. And then they do it in such a way like Queers for Palestine. So yeah, they are saying for Palestine, but they're also putting their own agenda in there. So that's not fair to the people who organize the march, who don't want that agenda being promoted. All you could do is say it once, and what else can you do?
Yeah, I think it's just such a visceral kind of moment, such a powerful kind of thing we're experiencing with the genocide, that so many different groups, so many different people are now coming out and supporting it, you know, in spite of whoever they are and whoever kind of they purport to be. Right, I said I don't want to flog this horse too much, but I think you know, again, talking about mobilizing communities, mobilizing the youth, scholarship, and so on and so forth, right? What are the dangers, from your point of view, of rushing too quickly into public work for someone who's either ill-equipped spiritually or ill-equipped kind of with the strategic and tactical side?
Well, it's like anything else in Sharia and Islam. We have to learn what is the boundaries of the Sharia. If we're Muslims, that's what we have to ask. What's the boundary of the Sharia when I go into this? And how do I keep my intention? How do I remember to keep my intention clean? And tawfiq, divine aid and success, is when you succeed at something, when you do something in accord to the Sharia and you're totally sincere. And that's it. And we should keep it simple. In the realm of politics, in the realm of activism, only support what Allah and His Messenger would support. That's it.
Right.
And that includes increasing the popularity of something, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man zada sawada qawmin fahuwa minhum." Right? Whoever increases the popularity of a group, you're one of them. Right? So that's it. That's basically only say the truth and support what God and His Prophet would have supported.
Right. Within this kind of like since October 7th, 2023, there just seems to be a lot of people coming out and saying things that are kind of either Islamically not kind of correct or strategically not kind of correct. But then, do you think that is the bigger danger no one stepping in and no one coming out and saying it, or is the bigger danger kind of saying things that are not completely right? I mean, and I'm talking about like a Sharia point of view.
The bigger danger is inaction, and the lesser danger is action and making mistakes.
So in that case, so I think that's a very good point, actually. So how do we then give advice, and how do we receive advice in kind of correcting ourselves and make sure that we are aligned strategically and Islamically?
Like all of us, and I have a couple of projects. You guys got projects. All of us as a team, we're always trying to get better. We're trying to share stuff. We're trying to make sure we're doing the right thing. We're trying to make sure all our bases are covered. And all of the activist groups should be that way. And there is probably a huge gulf between activists. A lot of them don't care about Islam, right? A lot of them don't care about Sharia. And some of them hate Muslims and they hate Sharia and they think imams are useless, right? That's on them. That's up to them. They have their own vision of the world, maybe more informed by leftism or Marxism. But what can you do? You can't talk to somebody who doesn't want to talk to you back. But in situations where you can talk, then we should open up these forums of dialogue so that everyone can learn from everybody else. I've been in the past probably sometimes overly critical of those types, given the situation, and probably may have not been so critical, knowing that how bad the situation is going to get. But ultimately, if there's an opportunity to talk, we talk. If someone doesn't want to talk, we don't want to talk.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. Sorry, do you have a wanted to ask in terms ask a few questions before we wrap up, inshallah. I want to structure like in terms of what specifically, how specifically should we train our youth in for the next generation, number one. Number two, maybe we'll just give. I'll ask you about us as are we in the Abyssinia phase where we should think about migrating back to Muslim lands because maybe things aren't working for us in the West? That's probably my second point. The third one will probably be to give a bit of hope, draw from instances. Like we know even this, like within the past 2 years, like we had Bashar al-Assad kicked out, Syria be freed. And then we also had Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh, be removed as leader. And so there's been a lot of, hopeful stories even in this recent past that we can draw from, but also would like to hear any other instances in history that we can draw from our Islamic tradition. But yeah, in terms of the first part, if we want to raise the Muslim youth to be like what we were discussing, like helping building the community, or like be Islamically learned, but also be politically savvy and be kind of knowledgeable in that aspect, what would you recommend for parents to do in order to make sure or ensure that their kids don't just become workers in this capitalist system and then just sort of do the tazkiyah on the side and that's it, but not really contributing in a meaningful way in this day and age? Or like should we even, like, for example, revamp our curriculums? Like, should it just be fiqh, aqidah? Should it include like understanding politics? For example, that's just my question in terms of what sort of training would you advise, or what sort of things would you advise for parents to put their kids through in order to make sure that they have the best opportunity to serve their community?
Well, Dr. Salah, he put it very well when he said all classical curriculums, they need to be couched in the present day needs. And there are some subjects that wouldn't have been studied in a classical curriculum that really need to be studied today. And one of those things that never really need to be emphasized is identity. What is our, when we have a whole cosmopolitan world today, and especially Muslims living in the West, identity is a big issue. What's our main identity? And how do I navigate all these things, being Bengali or Arab or what have you, also being American or Australian, also being Muslim? How do I put all this stuff together? And I think that's important for young people. Otherwise, they come up really confused. So the identity of being a Muslim is the first and foremost. And that should never, and the support of the ummah should never come at the expense of the support of your locality. Otherwise, you have what's a fifth column, and you're basically like bloodsuckers, people who use the nation that they're living in to support a nation outside or elsewhere. And that's a disgusting quality to have. So our concern for the entire ummah of Islam beyond the borders of the United States should not occur at the expense of the locality in which we live, so that nobody could ever look at us and say, well, what are you doing? You're just sucking resources from here and sending it over there because of your identity as a Muslim. In fact, zakah and sadaqah actually begins where you live. So in Islam, if you're capable of supporting your brothers and sisters abroad, you have first already supported the poor people here and the society that you live in here. And that's actually one of the most important features that will separate us from other diaspora groups who have loyalties outside of nationalism and ethnicity. That's what they do. They take, and they leave destruction in their wake when they're done with the nation after sucking it dry like a parasite and sending all the money somewhere else. So we have to study identity, and that's the first thing. Every Muslim kid should be taught that our first identity is Islam and to be Muslims. Then after that, it comes the literally the locality. And I'm like hyper local, not even American. What is the country is so big. Your locality, this immediate locality that I'm in, is what I'm going to be asked about by Allah. Did I make it better or not? Right? And it's what people are going to see. And if everyone does that, then we all improve the whole nation. So that's how you balance identity, in my opinion. And I would say where you live and where your kids and grandkids are going to be born takes precedent over where your parents and grandparents were born. So for myself, what have we done for New Jersey is more important than what have I done for New Brunswick, the few towns we live in. That's more important at the end of the day than what have I done for Cairo, where my parents were born. Is that's in the past. All right. So that, I would say, is number 3 of a priority. And that's how we're going to teach the juggling of religion, ethnicity, and locality. Or I would put it religion, locality, and ethnicity.
And to piggyback off that, in terms of, should our end goal be just building these institutions or this kind of Muslim economy or this sort of identity in the West, or should we just see it as a short-term goal where our long-term priority is to move back to Muslim countries so that we're able to be more closely, more closer to communities such as, people of Palestine, so that we can help them more?
I don't think so. If you're going to make hijrah, just do it now and put all your energy in now. But to live in a place and be half committed, that's not good. You're not even going to learn anything. Let's say I'm fully committed for 20 years. Then the situation gets so bad, I got to move, right? It's possible. But at least I learned something. At least I did something. But to be like half committed, you learn nothing, you benefit nothing. I'm not into that, right? You should be all in. If I was to be forced to move, or for whatever reason end up moving to another country, I'll be all in there. You got to be all in all the time. You learn, you benefit, it feels better, right? And it seems like it's the more right thing to do. And why would we imagine that 100 million Muslims living in Western countries plus Australia and New Zealand is temporary? I think it's permanent.
And so maybe my last 1 or 2 questions to wrap up is, would you be able to share any sort of stories from our own tradition or through Islamic history that can give us that hope that, situation in Palestine, for example, and Israel will be, taken down essentially? I know as I said, like we know in the recent past, Bangladesh, Syria, but also within the tradition, is there any sort of stories that you personally draw from to get that inspiration?
Well, there are general principles in life. Nothing lasts forever, and what goes up must come down. And the power of the Zionists will come down, and the weakness of the Ummah will eventually rise again from weakness to strength. But rather than hopes and dreams and things that we want to make ourselves feel better with, it's action. Just take an action in your locality. That's how, if you prove Islam where you are, and that's your support for the Ummah at large. And action, if you think about the Prophet Musa alayhi salam was very afraid of the snake, but Allah says, take it and don't be afraid. So action is what pushes away fear. And sadness, anxiety, depression, action is what pushes that stuff away. So I think that we should know for sure, 100%, what goes up must come down. The Zionist entity is not going to exist forever. U.S. support for it is already going down. I don't know if you guys are, you should get into a YouTube channel, Instagram channel called Breezy Politics. You familiar with it? So they're every day showing like congressmen town hall meetings and the reaction these people are getting. Everyone is so sick and tired of these AIPAC Congress people. I think America is going to kick Israel to the curb within the next generation. So everything that comes up must come down. And everything that's at the bottom, someday it'll rise up.
Yeah, because we're seeing it as well. Like people might say, like the fact that the Australian government had to recognize Palestine as state is because they can see, like I would say, the general sentiment, and all worldwide, to be honest, is that everyone is pretty pro-Palestinian. Like it's very small minority of people that are actually pro-Zionist. You know what I mean? In the context of the wider part, and that was seen like the whole Harbour Bridge had to be sort of blocked off because there was huge protests happening along. Like that's kind of the support. And I always say this story, like I remember I was at this sports shop and I saw this white Australian guy with his son, and then the kid goes to grab this this jersey that probably costs $150 or something like that, and the dad's like, and I thought I was overhearing it, and the dad's like, oh look, there's people, kids in Palestine like dying. Like, what are you doing? That kind of commentary. I'm like, okay, this is very interesting that it's in the in the public. This sort of is rolling off the tongues of white Australians, right? And similarly in America, I see that sentiment too. Like online, people are talking about how the tax money going towards Israel, like all these sort of issues, how they're causing a lot of problems obviously in Parliament and within politics, and it's not really helping. I mean, I guess they're going back to American nationalism, which is probably problematic from our Islamic theological standpoint, but nonetheless, they still recognize how problematic Israel's actions have been, obviously from towards the Palestinians, but also towards America and sucking them dry. So I think
nationalism as your spiritual identity and your superiority, that's an issue. But if you think about it, the Sharia itself commands your zakah to go to your locality, not outside. These are the people you live with. Your benefit has to go to them first. And it is discouraged to send your benefit abroad all the time. I mean, emergencies could happen, but all the time. And you're leaving the people you live with every single day. You walk in the streets with them. You're leaving them poor. So the idea of a nation saying, we're first, we come first, that's not in itself 100% off. That actually has a commonsensical element to it. The only difference is once it becomes a racial superiority, that's where we're going to part with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you had any final thoughts, Sheikh, before we wrap up, inshallah.
No, thank you guys very much. And nice talk to you after a couple years that we haven't talked. So, jazakumullah khairan. I appreciate your having me on.
I appreciate you giving us your time to discuss this pressing matters. Inshallah, in the future, properly, we can hopefully cover more ground as well. So I'll wrap it up there, inshallah. So from us listeners, thank you for giving us your attention. If you have any questions or queries, you can email us at boysinthecave@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Make sure to like and subscribe us on YouTube. We're on Spotify and Apple iTunes as well. Inshallah, we're looking forward to sort of rolling out more of this content with the next few weeks, inshallah, as well. So from our special guest, Dr. Shadee Elmasry, wish you the best. This is Nadeem and I signing off. Assalamu alaikum.